Hello, my name is Nicholas Furnival. You're watching an OSW interview. Today I'll be talking to Justyna Gotkowska, the Deputy Director of OSW. We'll be discussing Finland's accession to NATO and how it looks from Central Europe's perspective. So, Justyna, hello.
Hello.
Finland has just joined NATO, and should we expect Sweden to be joining soon?
I think this is something that we don't know really when the Swedish accession will happen. There is a window of opportunity directly after the presidential and parliamentary elections in Turkey that will take place on the 14th of May this year. Depending on the political situation in Turkey and depending on the willingness of President Erdogan or whoever will become the president and what will be the ruling coalition in Turkey, then there will be a decision or no decision about the ratification of the Swedish accession protocol. And then if the decision is to be taken and the protocol should be ratified, then we can expect Sweden to join NATO on the NATO Vilnius summit in mid-July this year. If this will not happen, and if we will face a political instability in Turkey in the weeks after the election, then the whole process might be postponed, and we might face a longer period of uncertainty about the Swedish accession to NATO. But I hope that might happen before the next NATO summit that will take place in 2024 in the US. We will be then in the beginning of the pre-election or election campaign in the US, and I suppose that the Biden administration would like to have a success to be announced at the NATO summit in the US in form of Sweden's accession to the alliance.
Okay, so we will base the rest of the interview on that hope that this will happen. And once Sweden is in, that makes the Nordic countries entirely NATO members.
That's true.
Okay.
And we'll end with this division that we had before. We had part of the Nordic countries being NATO members and part of them not being NATO members. Then we had overlapping cooperation formats for deepening military integration, military cooperation, and like, for example, NORDEFCO cooperation format for the Nordic countries, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland. We had also a cooperation format that included the United Kingdom, like joint expeditionary forces. And all these formats will now exist within NATO. And thus, the potential of such formats might be used to the full, so to say, and the integration of Nordic armed forces will continue.
Okay. I would like to discuss the integration of the Nordic armed forces, but Finland is a special case because it has this enormous eastern border with Russia. And that's very typical of another region, which is the Central European region and the eastern flank. Is it likely that Finland will be cooperating as part of the eastern flank?
I think both Finland and Sweden will try to find for themselves a bit different role within NATO. Finland has, of course, and Sweden have an obvious focus with regard to defense of their territories in the Baltic Sea region. And this is linked and tied to the defense of the Baltic states. But on the other hand, these countries will focus also on the so-called High North and will support Norway in the defense of the northern areas of Norway will focus also on operations and on NATO's activities with regard to countering the Russian potential in the far north. And so I see the two countries as being spanned between the high north and between the Baltic Sea. So I think both Finland and Sweden will play a double role, being partly a part of the eastern flank, and partly, or to a large extent, being part of the northern caucus within NATO. That would include also Norway, partly Denmark, but also the United Kingdom, that is very active in the high north.
Okay, is this to the expectations, though, of Central Europe? Because the Baltic states, Estonia is incredibly close to Finland. Perhaps they feel they now have a very close ally within NATO. Is this news of Finland and potentially Sweden's accession very welcome in the region, in the Central European region?
Definitely. From the perspective of the Baltic states, the membership of Sweden and Finland in NATO gives them an additional I don't want to say guarantee, but additional countries that will take part in the defense of the Baltic states. And not only geographically, the NATO will be able to use the territory of Finland and Sweden to undertake collective defense operations to the Baltic states, but also the military potential of Finland, of Sweden, will be used in such operations. There is also one element that is worth underlining. After Finland joined NATO, and hopefully after Sweden will join the alliance, the strategic situation in the Baltic Sea region will change to the favor of NATO. Russia will have much less possibilities to conduct aggressive, provocative operations or an aggression on the Baltic states, and I think the countries might feel more secure.
Russia will still have access to the Baltic. The Finland joining will not simply close off the straits.
Yes and no, because Finland has military capabilities to close the traffic, military and civilian traffic from Russia through the Baltic Sea, and this is. Finland, being a member of NATO, closes the Baltic Sea and makes inner lake of NATO out of the Baltic Sea. Overall, Finland joining NATO and hopefully Sweden joining NATO in the nearest future will make the Baltic states more secure, will help, or Finland will be able to, for example, defend Estonia from its own territory due to Finnish long-range weapons. So there will be no need to station Finnish troops in the Baltic states. So this is a huge difference that Finnish membership in NATO makes. And from these reasons, the Baltic states are have been extremely pleased with the membership of Finland in NATO and the incoming enlargement by Sweden, and have favored that over the past years.
Okay. Should we expect an exchange of troops and equipment between the countries? I'm interested in particular, should we expect to see, for example, Latvian boots in Finland?
Or Finnish boots, rather, in Latvia. I'm not sure that this will happen. because for obvious reasons the militaries of the Baltic states are pretty small and they are needed on the ground in Estonia, Latvia or Lithuania. With regard to Finland being present in the Baltic states, I think this might be also out of questions. We have heated debates about that in security and defense environments in Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, and I think these countries are of the opinion that it's better for Finland and for the security in the Baltic Sea region to have bigger allies present in the Baltic states. So first of all, the US, then the UK, France, Germany, to guarantee their presence. And small Baltic states are afraid that the bigger allies, especially France, Germany, might reckon that Finnish and Swedish membership is so good overall and increases the security of the Baltic states to the extent that their presence, military presence in Lithuania, Estonia or Latvia could be diminished. And therefore Baltic states do not really favor Finnish or Swedish boots on the ground in their countries, but would prefer Finnish or Swedish soldiers to participate in NATO's enhanced forward presence, for example, in the Black Sea region, in Romania or Bulgaria. So we might be faced in the coming months with such developments that Sweden and Finland participation in NATO will increase the security in the Baltic Sea region, will have regional defense planning being busted. But with regard to military presence, the Finns and the Swedes might be sending their troops to Romania or Bulgaria.
That's very interesting. I would still like to know, perhaps not Latvian boots, but could we expect British or American boots on the ground in Sweden or Finland?
I'm not sure whether Finland is keen to have a larger NATO military presence in the country. The Finns are proud of their defense model being based on small armed forces in peacetime, but that could be mobilized to a pretty large force in crisis and wartime. And Finns are convinced that they are able to defend their country more or less. The membership in NATO should boost the deterrence aspect of or the deterrence and prevent any aggressive provocative actions on part of Russia against Finland. Helsinki are not in favor of NATO allied presence in their country. And I think another aspect is that what they hear from Russia is that there will be a response to Finnish NATO membership if NATO decides on placing larger military force infrastructure in Finland. And I think Finland takes that into account and will be more careful than, for example, Poland and Baltic states that favor a large ally presence on their territories. And Finland will refrain from asking that from NATO in order not to provoke Russia, not to change an overall balance of forces between Finland and Russia as it is now.
I wanted to ask, because NATO is growing stronger, but so two large states joining are going to have an impact on the nature of the organisation. Could it take a more cautious line as an alliance as a whole if Finland is in favour of maybe a softly approach towards Russia? Could the whole of NATO change in this direction?
No, I don't think that Finland would favour a more soft approach. I think that Finland might be more careful with regard to stationing of NATO military troops in Finland. But that does not mean that Finland would be in favour of diminishing the deterrence and defense strategy of NATO and would hamper the development of this strategy. I think that Finland joined NATO to have additional security guarantees, especially with regard to increasing the deterrence and deterring Russia from undertaking any provocative, aggressive actions towards Finland. And therefore, Finland will be interested in improving NATO's defense and deterrence posture. And we are right now in the midst of a process of reforming NATO's collective defense structures. And NATO is developing regional defense plans, is developing a different or changing command and force structure. NATO is developing high readiness forces. And I would say that Finland would be in favor of developing and continuing all these processes, and definitely will take part of it, and will have to shoulder responsibility and would have to do more in all these aspects that all these areas that I mentioned. High readiness forces, Finland will have to give an input. Finland will take part in NATO's defense planning. Finland will take part in developing military capabilities according to NATO defense planning process. So Finland will have to adjust, and I think Finland will also be ready to undertake all these adjustments and will support NATO reforming its structures towards a more stronger collective defense.
I have just one final question. NATO has just expanded and may well continue to expand. So which country will be next, and will it be Ukraine?
I think that Eastern flank countries would favor very much Ukraine's accession to NATO, and Poland, Baltic states that we have mentioned in our discussion are in favor of starting this debate in NATO. I'm not sure whether and there will be any decisions undertaken during the Vilnius summit in July this year. It's rather unlikely that this will be the case because there are countries and allies in NATO that think that such a move right now in the midst of Russian-Ukrainian war is not a wise one. But from the perspective of Poland, of the Baltic states, only a NATO membership of Ukraine can guarantee a lasting peace in Eastern Europe and can guarantee that Russia's neo-imperial ambitions could be stopped. This view is not shared by some other allies. So what we can expect at the Vilnius summit is deepening political and military cooperation between NATO and Ukraine. And I think Poland and the Baltic states will push for strengthening these bilateral ties in the years to come.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I hope we have an opportunity to discuss other topics in future. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, please like and subscribe for more OSW content.